Welcome back, Decomp crew. You know the drill. Put on the gloves, crack open the file, and let's get into the part of the world most people would rather just not think about. Quick housekeeping note before we pull back the curtain on tonight's episode. The official Buried merch store is live over on Teespring. Stickers, mugs, sweatshirts, shirts, the whole decomposing truth. It is all sitting there waiting for you. So you can check the episode description for the link and rep the Buried Skull. Also, Buried is now streaming on Spotify and YouTube. So, however you like to listen, I've got you covered. Hit follow, drop a rating, leave a comment. It does help more than you would know. I used to get all kinds of upset for podcasters and live streamers to say that, but boy, now that I do it, it is really important. So, and finally, my novel We Are Buried Here Too is out. It came out June 1st. It's dark, it's forensic, it is deeply personal fiction, but built on the bones that I have walked beside in my real life. If you like what this show does, the book digs just about as deep. You can grab a paperback, hardcover, or digital exclusively on Amazon. And one last thing before we dive into the show, just want to remind everyone that I am Silas Knight. I am a medico-legal death investigator, currently working as a deputy coroner in a county unknown to you in a faraway land. And I'm not going to say where. I will say it is in America, which is somewhat relevant to our episode tonight. But just so everyone understands where we're at, this is Buried. We talk about the procedural failures in the systems with law enforcement coroners and ME's offices. We do not focus on conspiracy theories. We interpret findings that are often misinterpreted, and we kind of shed some light on a part of the system that most people don't really think about. So, with that being said, let's talk about a body that wasn't buried at all. Quick overview of what we are doing. We're going to go back to December 2nd of 2010. We are going across the pond to Melbourne, Australia. A concierge unlocks the refuse room of a luxury high-rise apartment building, expecting to see a mop, maybe some cleaning supplies. Instead, he finds a woman's body, face up on the floor, blood on the walls. Her foot is almost completely amputated, and at the time of discovery, she is still warm. That woman's name is Phoebe Handsjuk. She was 24 years old at the time, and somehow, miraculously, she went feet first down a garbage chute from the 12th floor. There are no witnesses, no cameras, no fingerprints. And tonight, I'm going to walk you through the autopsy, the toxicology, the mechanics of the chute itself, the bruises, the blood, and every investigative misstep that let this story slip through the cracks. A lot of questions surrounding this one. Was it suicide, misadventure, or murder, or something much, much worse, as we all know? A system that decided the ending before the scene was even processed. Once again, this is Buried, and this is the case of Phoebe Handsjuk. On the evening of December 2nd, 2010, like we had talked about, a concierge at Melbourne's upscale's Valencia Apartments went to the ground floor refuse room to fetch a broom, only to find the door mysteriously blocked from the inside. He pushed it open and was met with the sight of a bloodied 24-year-old Phoebe lying face up on the floor. At first glance, the concierge reports he thought it may have been a discarded mannequin among the garbage. In reality, this was Phoebe, alive just a couple moments earlier. She had fallen 12 stories down the building's garbage chute in one of the most bizarre and disturbing incidents Australian investigators report they had ever encountered. So she had initially survived the fall of about 30 meters. We're going to use across the pond measurements. But the compactor steel blade at the bottom ended up slicing her foot, her right foot, all the way through. So she's severely injured and disoriented. She attempts to crawl through the dark, filthy room. She leaves a trail of blood behind her. In a desperate attempt to reach the exit, she claws her way through but cannot find the door. So, this incredibly disturbing and shocking scene is the beginning of a perplexing mystery. And just a side note before we continue, it is an on call night for me, so I will be frequently checking my work laptop. So, if there's weird little pauses, I didn't go away. I'm just him probably reading notes on CAD. So it's the start of a perplexing mystery. How did this young woman end up plunging feet first down a narrow trash chute in a secure luxury building? A lot of people thought it might have been a freak accident or a suicide. There were thoughts of something more sinister. And over the next years following Phoebe's death, there's allegations of kind of police bunglings, cover ups, and the family's tireless quest for the actual truth. So, like I said, we're going to dive pretty deep into forensic details, the mechanics of the trash chute, the autopsy toxicology findings, and the evidence, or lack thereof in this case, that was left behind. And then we are going to kind of keep the troubling questions in the back of our mind while we do this. We're going to look into the legal aftermath, including how Phoebe's case prompted changes in Victoria's coronial law. So, like I said, this is in Australia, so not exactly my expertise, but I thought it would be fun to challenge myself this week to do one that was out of the country. So, we are going to get into the facts of the mysterious death of Phoebe Handsjuk. So, it's kind of hard to overstate how bizarre this death scene actually is. There were seasoned Melbourne police officers that commented that they had never seen anything like it. Her body was found around 7 p.m. It was in a large pool of blood next to a tipped over 240-liter garbage bin in the ground floor refuse room. So, like I said, I'm going to try to stick with metric units of measurement out of respect for our stray and cohorts. So, she's face up by the door. It looks like she's been crawling towards it when her strength finally gave out. There's blood smears on the floor. It shows that she had dragged herself quite a bit of a distance, despite her catastrophic injuries. She was alive immediately after the fall. Her right foot is completely severed by the compactor blade. She manages to climb out of the bin and inch towards the door before bleeding to death. The chute that Phoebe fell through was the building's main rubbish disposal shaft. I'm really leaning in hard to the lingo of not America. So it's a narrow vertical tube. It runs down from each floor. Falling feet first from the 12th floor, she had essentially dropped the height of an 11-story building straight down. So, blood loss or exsanguination was the ultimate cause of death. It happened probably pretty quickly once she was down there. A pathologist would later remark that, quote, Phoebe fought for her life even as it drained away, quote, noting that she still ended up by the door face up even though she fell into the refuse bin. So like we said, the concierge originally is going to think that this is a mannequin that was disposed of. But under the fluorescent light, it does show that it's a young woman. She's in jeans, a tank top covered in blood. This is where things start to get strange. Phoebe's jeans were pulled down around her lower legs when she was found. That could be an artifact of her dragging herself or crawling, but it's not definite. There's no obvious signs of a struggle in the trash room itself, but Phoebe's injuries still tell a pretty terrifying tale. The alarmed concierge immediately calls emergency services. Paramedics arrive, and they find a dying, now deceased woman among the garbage, amputated foot, blood everywhere. So news of that incident spreads. Phoebe's own family struggles to comprehend it. Her mother, Natalie, recalls collapsing to her knees on the sidewalk, wailing, quote, "No, no, no, it's not true," quote. So Phoebe's grandfather is a retired police detective. He gets the news around 10 p.m. that night. He's absolutely speechless. His quote is that he, quote, "I believe she had been murdered right from the start. It was such an impossible way to die that Lauren's," I'm sorry, let me back that up. Her grandfather said, quote, "I believe she had been murdered right from the start," end quote. It was such an impossible way to die that his instincts, her grandfather's name is Lauren Campbell, Lauren's instincts immediately say foul play. The police, however, not so sure. This kind of death at the time in Melbourne was pretty unheard of. So investigators, they take in the gruesome scene in the garbage room, and they face like a slew of just absolutely daunting, baffling questions that they're not used to. So first and foremost, how did she get into the trash chute? Did she climb in herself? If she did, why would she do something like that? If not, did someone force her in? There's no cameras inside the refuse room or any cameras aimed at the trash chute, so the moments leading up to Phoebe's fall are completely unrecorded. Her last known movements are going to be on that day, December 10th, 2010. Phoebe Handsjuk lived with her boyfriend, 40-year-old Anthony Ant Hample. It was a plush 12th floor apartment of the Valencia high rise on St. Kilda Road in Melbourne. According to Anthony's testimony, that morning, Phoebe was in bed recovering from a night of heavy drinking. The couple had been out with friends the night before. Phoebe had gotten quite intoxicated, so much so that on the morning of December 2nd, she was still, quote, in recovery mode, quote, and feeling unwell. Anthony said he left for work around 9 or 10 a.m., leaving Phoebe in bed in their apartment. Later that day, around 11:44 a.m., the building's fire alarm unexpectedly went off, triggering a brief evacuation. Phoebe is captured on the lobby CCTV just before noon, exiting the building with her dog, Yoshi, and then all the other residents as they file out during the alarm. That is the last confirmed sighting of Phoebe prior to her discovery. And I need to check this call real quick. Okay. Good there. What is this one? Oh. That's cool. Someone being shot at. Allegedly. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. So around noon, this is the last confirmed sighting of Phoebe live on camera. The footage depicts her holding Yoshi on a leash. She stumbled slightly as she walked, and this is attributed to a lingering result of her intoxication or grogginess from medication. Witnesses of the residents in the building say she appeared unsteady on her feet. Once the all clear was given, she goes back upstairs to the 12th floor with her dog. Sometime after 12 p.m., her activities start to become a mystery. Anthony says he tries calling and texting her a few times that afternoon, but he got no response. That's his claim. Phone records would later show some activity, but one of Phoebe's phones would actually vanish. So I don't need to hit it myself, but we'll talk about it. We do know that Phoebe had plans that evening. She and Anthony were supposed to meet her father, Len Handsjuk, for dinner, and Len reports he was looking forward to catching up with his daughter and her boyfriend. As the day went on, Len's not able to reach Phoebe either. She doesn't show up on the planned time, and this immediately strikes Phoebe's family as odd. She's had been really excited to see her dad. It's just out of character for her. Anthony gets home from work shortly after 6 p.m. And this is kind of a key part of the story, what he finds when he returns. So this is Anthony's account. He comes home, the apartment's dark, and Phoebe is nowhere to be found. Her personal items, he notes, are still there: purse, keys, and wallet on a kitchen counter. He describes it as if she had just stepped out briefly. In the kitchen slash living area, there are two wine glasses on the table. One of them, interestingly, is empty. Uh, the police, however, would never dust these glasses for fingerprints. Why, I couldn't even begin to tell you. Even if there was an excuse, like, I would love to hear what it is. I mean, that's just like a you eat it as being stupid and move on. So anyway, on the floor there's a shattered glass from a drinking tumbler of some sort, and there's drops and smears of blood around the shards. Anthony describes that he finds blood on the computer, mouse, and keyboard, which were a part of Phoebe's workstation in the apartment. So, in short, the apartment scene is pretty alarming. There's broken glass, there's blood. Phoebe is gone without the stuff that she normally carries with her phone, keys. This is all screaming something has clearly happened to her. But, we'll continue. So Anthony states, quote, "I was becoming very concerned at that point," end quote. Banger of a statement there, bud. He said that in reference to his mindset when he came home to the scene. He claims he searched the apartment and the 12th floor common areas, calling out for her, but found no sign of her. By 6:30, 6:45, she's still missing. There's blood on the floor. He finally takes the elevator down to the lobby, looking for some help. It's not entirely clear from the official records whether he pulled the fire alarm or directly informed building staff, but around 7 p.m., the concierge who found her uh, okay. Uh, I lost where I was. Um, so, okay, around 7 p.m., the building's concierge checks the refuse room. We don't know if it was because Anthony asked him to or not. Um, it could just be coincidentally. But that's when Phoebe's body was discovered. Um, they believe minutes after she had landed there. The coroner would later conclude that, quote, I'm sorry, Phoebe likely went down the chute, quote, only minutes before her body was found by the concierge around 7 p.m. So, the timeline is already super messy for this case. So Anthony comes downstairs. He's confronted with every boyfriend's worst nightmare. He sees police and paramedics rushing in, and he finds out the body's Phoebe's. His account, he says he's shocked. Investigators question him that night. As the scene is processed, he's asked point blank at a later inquest whether he had any involvement in Phoebe's death. Anthony says, quote, absolutely not, quote. He claimed he had no idea why or how Phoebe would have gotten into that chute. Meanwhile, Len, who's Phoebe's father, and other family members are being notified of her death. It's I don't, this is a hard notification to make because I mean, like, all notifications are hard to make, but like, at least for most of them, you have something to tell them. And you might not tell them outright exactly the circumstances of the case. I certainly don't, but like, in this one, you don't even have that option. You're just like, yeah, man, she's found at the bottom of a trash chute, and it's like, holy shit. They're like, how? Why? And you just gotta say, oh. So, Really weird. Not a normal suicide, not a normal accident. The story makes absolutely no sense. So, Lorne, he puts a quote out, her grandfather. He says, quote, Phoebe was so beautiful, and for her to die in that way, it is as if you are saying to the world she is nothing but garbage, end quote. So the family outright refuses to accept that Phoebe chose to end her life by diving to a trash chute, which I'm not going to lie, would be a strange, strange way to end your life. But uh, a little bit about her, because I think it is important to know the person in some of these cases before we jump into the forensic evidence. She is described as a vibrant, creative young woman. She's beloved by her family and friends, but she's got some personal demons. She was born in May of '86, grew up in a loving family in Melbourne. She is the eldest child. I don't know why I wrote that in the notes. That's dumb. She's the eldest child, duh. She's the only daughter of Lenz and Natalie Handsjuk, her mother and father. Um, she has two younger brothers, and she was described as the kind of person who would, quote, brightened every room she walked into, end quote. She is described as artistic, outdoorsy, and a free spirit. Phoebe also has a rebellious streak. She battles anxiety and depression. In her mid-teens, she did begin drinking heavily and experimenting with drugs. There's a couple tumultuous years at one point. When she was 15, she did run away to live with an older boyfriend who was an ex-convict. We're out here just making great life choices. She eventually came back home. She started seeing a psychiatrist. She gets on antidepressants to stabilize her mood. And by her early 20s, she's trying to find a direction. So she works at reception at a hair salon in South Yarra, and she's described as well-liked for her warm personality. It was around that time, which is going to be late 2009, that Phoebe met Anthony Hampel, the man who she would come to live with, and then would kind of be the prominent one in this whole tragedy. So he was 39 at the time that they met, and Phoebe was 23. So he's almost double her age. He is a wealthy events promoter, and he is from a very prominent family. Ant's father is a former Supreme Court judge named George Hampel, and his stepmother is Judge Felicity Hampel. They are among Melbourne's elite. The Hampel name carries a lot of weight in social circles, and Ant does run his own successful event management company. He organizes incredibly lavish celebrity parties and entertainment events. He lives this super polished, high-flying lifestyle. Expensive cars, luxury apartment, famous clients. So for a free-spirited woman like Phoebe, it's like a whole new glamorous world she had never experienced. So obviously she's very drawn to him. At first, her friends and family are like, not sure about this. 16-year age difference. And the differences in their kind of temperaments raised some eyebrows. Phoebe fell for him regardless. It started as a salon flirtation. He was a client. And within months, it's a serious relationship. By October of '09, she's moved into his apartment at the Valencia Apartments, the St. Kilda Road Tower. For a little while, everything's kosher. But soon, cracks start to show. Friends of theirs would testify later that Ant was incredibly controlling in the relationship. He had very particular tastes. His apartment was to be kept immaculately clean and minimalist. Some people described it as almost like a show home. Phoebe's personal items are relegated to a downstairs storage area. She is artistic and kind of bohemian by nature, so she tries to conform to this lifestyle. She cuts her long hair into a short, kind of upscale cut, um, which, creepily enough, her grandmother says makes Phoebe look like a younger version of Aunt's sister. So, uh, it, Phoebe continues to see her therapist, and she actually confides in her therapist that Aunt would be defensive, aggro, and aggressive during arguments. She felt she had no voice in the relationship, and in the 6 weeks leading up to her death, Phoebe had broken up with Aunt 4 times, only to reconcile a short time after each one. Their relationship was described as a roller coaster of drama, emotional fights, brief splits, and passionate makeups. So, guy sounds like a real douche nozzle, and she sounds like a hippie. So, you know, not exactly a match made in heaven. Phoebe's mental health in this time period is also incredibly fragile. So she's on antidepressants. She's taking an antidepressant in addition to the sleeping pill Stillnox. She also is self-medicating with alcohol, drinking heavily, which does not mix with her prescription medications. Her psychiatrist is Dr. Joanna Young. She saw Phoebe the week of her death and noticed she was depressed but not suicidal. In fact, she admits to her therapist that she had been planning a fresh start. She had also told her family she intended to move out of Melbourne to the coastal town of Malakuta. I don't know how you say that. Malakuta, where her mother had a cottage, and she had lined up a new job there. She had dreams of saving money, traveling to India to do volunteer work, and do aid work in the future. Uh, Family would say these plans hardly sounded like someone who's about to end her life. So I've kind of, I don't know what you want to call it. I've touched on this before. Just because somebody has plans does not mean that they are not going to harm themselves. Um, and I've literally had to explain this to family. Some people, I had a case recently, and I'm not going to tell you the specifics, but quite literally, I had a person who died, and their family member was adamant that they could not have died, and this was a natural death. I don't know if I mentioned that. Their family member was adamant that they could not have died because they had plans to have breakfast with them the next day. And I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, what does that mean? And they literally, in their mind, they were like, we had plans to go to breakfast. Like, this can't be natural. Like, she can't be dead. Like, it was wild. It was like the craziest thing that I have ever experienced. Maybe not the craziest, but definitely one of. So, it's just, there's no guarantees. Just because she had these big long-term plans doesn't mean that she wasn't planning on hurting herself. It's just that that's what people want to think. So, in the days leading up to December 2nd, the mood is described as turbulent. On November 29th, Phoebe and Aunt had dinner with friends, but dipped early after an argument. Aunt, at the time, was reportedly chastising her for talking to others about their relationship problems. That same night, Phoebe meets up with a friend and drinks. Aunt blows up her phone, 27 calls in 1 hour. Phoebe angrily threw her phone, breaking it, and fled to her mother's place for the night. That's on a Monday. By Tuesday, she's back at Aunt's apartment. Tuesday and Wednesday, She's kind of in this awful emotional state. She calls a crisis hotline. She contacts her psychologist. She texted a strange group message to her family and friends early Wednesday that says, quote, "I'm going to hospital. I love all of you. Life is but a dream," end quote. The message is later dubbed the tomato soup text for its odd reference to hospital soup. Sounded like the ramblings of somebody that was under influence or kind of in a dissociative state. So it worried her loved ones a lot. Phoebe's mother and friends, they try to check on her that day. By Thursday, which is the day of her death, Phoebe is back at the Valencia apartments. Aunt goes to work. She's sitting alone with her thoughts. Her grandmother talked to her on the phone midday. Phoebe assured Nan she was okay, apologized for the weird text, said she was freaking hammered the night before. And the CCTV at noon kind of backs that up. She looks like she's still intoxicated from the bender she was on. Aunt's personal assistant would deliver some takeaway lunch early in the afternoon. And that person says that Phoebe seemed a little out of it. The PA delivered lunch for one, which is odd because if Aunt had expected to eat lunch with her. But it might just indicate that he knew Phoebe wasn't going to go out that day. So all these details, they definitely paint a picture of a young woman who's in crisis, but and also trying to kind of find a way out of her situation. So yes, she's emotionally unstable that week. Yes, she has an alarming episode. Was she suicidal? Her therapist doesn't think so. Phoebe has made future plans. Her family knows, or firmly thinks they know. They firmly believe she would not have chosen the garbage chute as the way out. They say that Phoebe is terrified of dark, confined spaces. She has claustrophobia, and that if she was going to kill herself, she would have been far more likely to jump from the balcony rather than, quote, stuffing herself into a chute to be disposed of by like trash. The chute death scenario, completely out of character for her. It's counterintuitive for who she is as a person, and all this context makes it really hard for Phoebe's loved ones to accept the initial explanation that kind of begins to emerge from authorities. And that explanation is that Phoebe has somehow drunkenly climbed into the garbage chute by herself and fell 12 floors to her death. But within hours of the discovery of her body, police are leaning towards that. So it's the obvious, easy answer, I mean, sure, why not? Like, that's like the most minimal investigation you'll have to do. Of course, she stuffed herself in and fell 30 meters. So, no crime, no suspect, no victim. Not really. She did it to herself. So, this is not... This doesn't sit well with me. And to kind of get into the chute mechanics, we got to talk about the chute. So getting into the chute was not something that was easy to do, especially if you are so drunk you can't walk. So it's basically a square shaft. It runs vertical down the building. Each floor had a refuse room or an alcove where the chute's opening was accessible behind a small hatch. In Valencia, the chute opening for each floor was about a meter off the ground, 3.5 feet. The hatch was 37 centimeters by 22 centimeters. That's 14.5 by 8.5 inches. So the opening is just a little bit bigger than a laptop. Okay, in width. It's just, and I mean just, large enough for someone who's petite like Phoebe to fit in. but she would have to kind of contort herself in like the precise exact way to get herself in. And then if you kind of lean towards that, then the next thing you have to consider is that the chute has a heavy spring loaded steel door that snaps shut on its own. So normally what would happen is residents open the hatch, drop in their trash or their bag of trash, and the door would slam shut to contain odors, to make sure nothing got stuck in the like opening. So the spring mechanism, it means that if you tried to climb in, the door would press against them all the time. And then also it would pretty easily swing shut on someone's hands, fingers. It would scrape against their back or their limbs. There was an experiment later done that demonstrated that the hatch tends to swing and hit you in the back, effectively jamming you part way if you attempted to crawl in. So probably pretty hard if you're so drunk and medicated that you can't move or walk. There's no handles or footholds inside the chute. It's a smooth metal tube, so once you're in, that's it. Gravity's doing the work. So, like I said, she hated tight, dark spaces, but let's just, for the sake of argument, hypothesize she decided to go down the slide of the trash chute. The only feasible way for an adult to enter would be feet first. So basically, you'd have to raise your legs up, slide them in, and then shimmy your torso through. Going head first would be incredibly awkward, and you'd almost definitely get stuck. The coroner does conclude that Phoebe went down feet first with her hands by her sides. Now, you don't have to be an expert in any field to think about the logistics of that. The opening is chest high on the wall. So she would have to hoist herself up or jump to get her hips on the latch. Then they'd have to hold the latch. She would have to hold the latch door open while maneuvering in. So this is where the forensic skepticism is going to come in. Phoebe was not sober that afternoon. She was not sleeping off a bender. She was probably actively consuming alcohol that day. Her BAC at the time of autopsy is 0.16. So that's double the legal limit in America. That's triple the legal limit in Australia. She also had a significant dose of Stilnox, which is Zolpidem, and her antidepressant medication in her system. Stilnox, for those of you who don't know, it causes disorientation. It can cause huge memory lapses. It can cause sleepwalking behaviors. So Phoebe would have been severely impaired, dizzy, uncoordinated, possibly in kind of a hazy, dreamlike state of consciousness. Lorne, her grandfather, would comment that Phoebe became uncoordinated after about 2 drinks. So, which I don't know if I believe, because I'm assuming that he's exaggerating, because if you are a heavy alcoholic, even if you start, she's pretty young at the time, she's 24. So, but if you've been drinking since you were 15, that's 9 years of alcoholism. That's a long time to build up a tolerance. So, I don't know if 2 would set her off, but 0.16 is quite a bit. So, but the family nonetheless says she could probably physically perform the task, but being as impaired as she was, probably not. So Lorne, who is the retired police officer, a couple months after her death, he actually obtains the exact same make and model of trash chute used in the Valencia, and he constructs a replica for experiments. He talks to 2 of Phoebe's friends who were pretty similar to her build, and they attempt to climb into the chute while sober, with safety harnesses on. And the results Surprise absolutely fucking nobody. So, with no drugs or alcohol in their system, they are described as fit, agile, athletic young women. The friends could only get into the chute with great difficulty. It was far from a simple slide. They found they had to stand on tiptoe or be lifted to get their legs in. One of her friends, Vivian, had to raise her arms above her head and wiggle her shoulders through, and she could not fit her upper body with her arms at her side. Vivian needed assistance to hold the chute door open. Otherwise, it would swing shut on her and pin her. The metal flaps, the chute, the metal flap would pinch the back of her hands if it wasn't held. She commented afterwards the whole process took considerable balance and strength. Both friends and Lauren agreed that if Phoebe had been intoxicated, as the toxicology results showed, it's highly unlikely she was going to do this. So there's a former police detective that comes into the scene now, Roland Legg, with 2 G's. He also analyzes the chute entry and points out a huge design flaw or issue, not flaw. I'm sure it's on purpose. He says, quote, one of the major problems, apart from the dimensions, is that the door comes up against your lower back and jams you in, end quote. He goes on to say, quote, trying to maneuver yourself is not helped by the fact there's nothing to grip onto, and whatever Phoebe had in her system at the time would have made it even more difficult, end quote. So, in kind of summary, the physics and the human factors are pretty well stacked against the possibility of Phoebe getting into that chute voluntarily. So, moving on to the forensic clues in her body, if she had somehow got in, you would probably expect to see injuries on her hands, her elbows, her knees, scratches on her back, something like that. But in her autopsy, Phoebe has no injuries to her hands or fingers. No cuts, no bruises. This suggests that she's not frantically grabbing at the chute edges. She's not pushing the heavy door open with her hands, at least not in any sort of struggle. She did, however, they noted, have bruises on her upper arms, wrists, plural, and neck. At first, the police, Melbourne's finest, they theorized that the bruising may have come from bracing herself inside the chute. Like if she had had her arms out trying to slow her fall and they banged against the sides. But the replica, once again, cast doubt on that. Given the super tight fit, her arms would have been overhead. Likely overhead, not at her sides. And the pattern of the bruises, which are going to be circular and oval on her inner arms, look more consistent with finger marks, like someone was gripping her arms or wrists firmly. The bruises on her neck are pretty similar. They indicate a chokehold or pressure. They say it's speculative. That's not a clear strangulation mark, but okay. It's a red flag. Come on. So, and then this is, I kept this in here rather, but I think this one's explainable. So the mystery of Phoebe's jeans. When her body is found, her pants are pulled down around her ankles, or her lower thighs. It depends who you ask. So people kind of assume that she may have been assaulted, or this was done to hobble her or make her easier to carry. The coroner never really provides a satisfying explanation for this. These are kind of theories that are floated by other people. Phoebe's mother thinks this indicates sexual assault or some sort of human interference. There's a couple arguments the other way, which I tend to kind of agree with. One is her right foot is severed by the blade of the trash compactor. So she's intoxicated, she's medicated, She's now incredibly injured and losing a lot of blood. There is a way that maybe in her delirium she pulls at her pants or pushes her pants or something uh, to stop the bleeding, or is some kind of state where she's doing something she's not cognizant of. That's a big stretch. One theory is that she might have been trying to remove it to make a tourniquet. That's like some Hollywood shit. Um, that's pretty unlikely. So I think what's more likely is the fact that she uh, fell, or you know, I mean, she did fall either way. Um, I don't know the circumstances of how she came to fall, but she falls, is injured. The blade cuts off her foot, possibly part of her jeans. And there's some places say that her foot was completely severed. Some say it was partially severed. So either the blade gets caught on her jeans as it retracts and pulls from her jeans off, or they said she crawled towards the door. It could just be that with all the trauma, all the blood, everything, when she starts crawling, her pants just come down. So I'm not sold on this being like the smoking gun of this case, but it's definitely something that should have been addressed. Um, so then we're going to move on to what wasn't found. Blood traces. So there's broken glass and blood in the apartment. If Phoebe has cut herself on that glass and then wandered out into this room, intending maybe to get rid of the trash, which is a scenario the police kind of floated. They theorized that Phoebe cut herself on the glass and then wandered it to the refuse room, intending to dispose of trash. I guess they're not European. They're Australian. But you'd think that you'd see a trail of blood leading out of the apartment or on the chute door or handle or something. But lo and behold, no blood on the exterior door handle, none in the 12th floor hallway, none on the chute, none on the hatch handle, none on the surrounding wall. If a bleeding person walks from an apartment to a trash room, and the only blood is at the bottom of the chute, just probably was not actively bleeding at the time. So maybe the cut was a small one, or she bandaged it or something, but it also could point to the fact that she did not walk there under her own power or of her own free will. So it's puzzling, and it's just one of a laundry list of things that's not analyzed at the time properly. So all the forensic factors: chute, dimensions, lack of fingerprints, peculiar bruises, pants position, absence of blood traces, these all kind of culminate into Phoebe's solo chute dive being implausible, if not impossible. There are a host of independent experts in the intervening years that have later described it as, quote, virtually impossible, quote, for her to have entered the chute unaided. Even the coroner's assistant counsel would later agree the scenario was far-fetched. Which I like that. The coroner's assistant counsel. So, another crucial point, there's no fingerprints at all on the 12th floor chute door, the steel, or the surrounding wall. Obviously, this is pretty significant because if Phoebe opened the hatch herself, she probably touched it. You know, that's typically when I'm touching something, I'm touching it. You know what I mean? I would assume that with the amount of maneuvering that she had to do, that she would have left a smudge or a partial, if not a full palm handprint somewhere. The forensic team actually reported the chute door appears to have been wiped clean. Shocking. No usable prints from Phoebe. And presumably, none from anybody else. It's possible the surface was clean or that prints didn't register, but to Phoebe's grandfather and me and probably everyone else, it looks like someone deliberately removed the evidence. Uh, Lauren says that to him, the pristine chute door screams foul play, as if someone pushed her down and then wiped it away quickly. I, I'm with you on that one, Lauren. So the mechanics of the chute and the state of Phoebe's body are strongly suggestive that if she went down the chute, it was a freak accident of unimaginable odds, or someone else was involved in putting her there. So we're left with this sort of perplexing question. Could Phoebe, in a drug and alcohol fueled stupor, have somehow stumbled into the chute on her own, not fully aware of what she was doing, or even sleepwalking, as one theory has been floated out there? Or is it more likely there's a second party involved through violence or an accident cover up? So as we go forward with the rest of the show here, the rest of the pod, keep these kind of forensic improbabilities in mind. So the autopsy of Phoebe Handsjuk is conducted by a senior forensic pathologist, and it confirms a lot of what we've already talked about. Cause of death: hemorrhage due to severance of the right foot. Basically, she bled out from a massive wound where her foot was cut off or almost cut off. The pathologist notes that the right foot was attached only by a thin strip of skin. All the bone and connective tissue have been cleaved by the compactor blade. Man, I wish we wrote autopsy reports like that. I have cleaved it and twixt. There's also deep lacerations to her right thigh and buttock, consistent with the same blade slicing in an upward motion as she fell on it. Despite the fall from the 12th floor, Phoebe does not have extensive trauma like you might expect. Jesus. For instance, no skull fracture, no broken neck. There is a high likelihood that the garbage she landed on mitigated some of the impact. She did have some internal injuries and fractures, broken pelvis, broken legs. But the autopsy details really weren't highlighted anywhere that say that those were definitive. So nothing but the foot injury was fatal. So it does not go down as multiple blunt force injuries, which I would expect to see in a fall from that height, even if onto a pile of trash. And then the autopsy also makes clear that Phoebe was alive for a short time after the impact. There was evidence of antemortem blood flow from her injuries, which basically just means that her heart was still pumping after the foot was severed. She probably lost consciousness within minutes. Rough. Phoebe's hands and nails, remarkably uninjured. You would assume that had somebody been conscious during the fall, she probably would have tried to claw at something or push against the walls or slow herself down. I don't know, unless you're super committed to, I don't know. I don't buy it. So she calmly works her way into the chute, calmly puts her hands at her sides, and then calmly falls 12 stories. So some people use this to point at the idea that she may have been unconscious or semi-conscious. So they're saying like someone dumped her body, or she's sleepwalking, or in a dreamlike state, which is all purely speculative. So, but also her friends couldn't make it into the chute without their hands over their heads. So there's also a chance that her hands were kind of like stuck above her head as she went down. So the autopsy does catalog the unusual bruises, specifically the oval-shaped bruises on the inner sides of her wrists and forearms, and what's described as a faint ligature-like bruise on her neck. These are totally unexplained by the dynamics of the fall. They're more consistent with a grip mark, like someone forcibly grabbed her. They could possibly come from banging against the chute. while being put into the chute if someone shoved her in. Maybe. The coroner, obviously, you know, because he's not a brain dead moron, struggles to find any sort of innocent explanation for these marks. But because he's kind of a brain dead moron, just kind of glosses over them. Just kind of notes that they're there and then doesn't really comment on their significance. So her blood alcohol is 0.16. Given her size and everything, that's about 8 or more standard drinks in a pretty short period of time. At this level, you are definitely intoxicated. You are going to experience impaired motor skills, slurred speech, incredible emotional volatility. And then on top of that, she has ingested generic Zolpidem, a prescription sleeping pill, and antidepressants. I could not find a specific name, but there were a couple mentions of Effexor or Cymbalta. So the Stilnox level was, quote, high, quote, likely indicating she took more than a normal dose. Stilnox or Zolpidem, as most people in the States are probably going to be familiar with, it does have a tendency to cause parasomnia, which is a super fancy word for doing things in your sleep with no memory. So some people who have taken Zolpidem have reported sleepwalking or even sleep driving with no memory of the event. Zolpidem and alcohol together have a synergistic effect. They can cause blackouts when mixed and hallucinations. So, two super sweet things that everyone wants. The coroner uses these findings to support the idea that Phoebe might have been in a dreamlike or dissociative state, and he speculates that she could have been sleepwalking under the influence and not fully aware of her action. There are, like I said, cases of people on Stilnox doing odd things unconsciously. It's not impossible. On the other hand, the presence of those substances means that Phoebe was also incredibly vulnerable at the time. So if foul play occurred, the perpetrator may have used that impairment to take advantage of her. She may have been too intoxicated to resist, or even remember the events clearly, so even if she had lived. So, next up, the time of death estimates. So, the coroner concludes that Phoebe likely went down the chute sometime between 12:03 p.m. and 7 p.m. And obviously, this is a super, super wide gap. But he does theorize it was probably closer to 7 p.m. But it's not like it is on TV where you can stick your finger in their ass and say, oh yeah, it was 7:26 when they died. Time of death is nuanced. I consider it more of an art than science, which you know what I mean. So, huge range, but it just raises all kinds of questions and breeds uncertainty. Did she go in after she was last seen on the camera at noon? Was she in the apartment all afternoon until something happened in the evening? Ant testifies that he got home around 6 and she's not there. So if we take Ant at his word, which I'm not going to because he's got a dumb name, I'm just kidding, that's not why. Something must have happened between 12 after the fire drill and 6 when he got home. Nobody in the Valencia neighbors, anything, they report no noises, no disturbances in that window between 12 and 6. At least none that came forward. One scenario that's floated is that Phoebe, in a kind of intoxicated stupor, accidentally fell into the chute earlier in the day and nobody notices until hours later. It seems unlikely given other residents use the trash chute throughout the day. Um, so she probably would have been covered, or she would have been discovered sooner. Strange. It's the most plausible that she went down not too long before 7. So if that's the case, by Ant's testimony, he's home at 6 or a little bit before or after, uh, and she's found at 7. What's going on between 6 and 7? Was she alone? Was someone with her? Was she self-harming? Is she having an episode? There is no evidence of sexual assault reported. Aside from the oddity of her pants being down, coroner indicates no findings or signs of the R word or SA. So, side note, okay. So I got it's just total tangent. So I got an email from YouTube about the Ellen Greenberg case. Not Ellen Greenberg. Was Ellen Greenberg or Lawrence Smithfield? One of the two. I had mentioned self-harm, the S word, because that was a theory that was floated in that case. And they pulled the video. They didn't pull it like off of YouTube, but they pulled like a specific timestamp from the video and they sent it to me. And they were like, YouTube and others are worried about you. Like, please reach out. Your mental health is most important. You talk about self-harm at this part of the video. And I went back and looked and listened, and it was me talking about how the autopsy results like were not consistent with like a self-harm or like the S word. So I'm fine. If you're one of the people out there reporting my video because I say the selfie self-harm word, I'm talking about it forensically, medical legally, criminologically. So I'm good. Please don't report the video. I don't need YouTube's help. I'm fine. So I'm talking about this in a professional way. Maybe the tone's not professional, but the word usage is professional. So please leave me alone. So anyway, okay. So the coroner did not indicate any findings of the R word or SA. So forced coitus. So it doesn't rule out a sexual assault, but there's not like a clear scenario. One of the theories is that it was attempted, or maybe Phoebe feared that it was going to happen, which led to a fight. Again, totally speculative. So the autopsy confirms the presence of something like Lexapro or Effexor at therapeutic levels, meaning she's taking her prescriptions as they were prescribed. So combined with alcohol, SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they can increase someone's impulsivity. It's kind of a tangled web to interpret. But given all that she was on, was she in a state of mind that she would do something impulsively dangerous? Was she essentially incapacitated and she's a victim? The sum up of the autopsy toxicology results are that Phoebe was very intoxicated. She was physically injured, and there was suspicious bruising inconsistent with the accident. So there's two ways to read the forensic evidence. Either it's an extraordinary accidental death aided by impairment, or it's a homicide staged to look like a freak accident. For me, obviously, like I've said a million times, everything's a homicide till you find evidence. Otherwise, everything is a homicide. Every single death is a homicide until you find evidence that it is not. I had that discussion with my pathologist this week during an autopsy. We were talking about a case that she was working on, and she literally said, this type of injury is always a homicide until you can prove otherwise. And I was like, should have you on the show. So, does not line up with the official account, a lot of the pieces. So, which brings us to the official account. In an unusual death like this, we would hope for, of course, a meticulous and open-minded investigation that is going to treat this as foul play until we prove otherwise. The initial police response to Phoebe's death was far from thorough. It would draw heavy criticism later, especially from me. Within 5 days, Melbourne's homicide squad had already concluded Phoebe's death was likely a suicide or misadventure, not a murder. And they closed the case. 5 days. That's record freaking time for a case like that to be closed. I can't imagine. I don't know the laws in Australia. Nope, hold on. Poo. Damn. All right. I'm gonna have to go to a call soon. Anyway, that's pretty fast to close a case like this. I don't know the laws. I don't know how fast it would take to get like a dump on her phone and stuff like that, but I feel like 5 days would be pretty quick. So this premature conclusion has a lot of consequences, and it means that certain evidence is just never collected or tested, and the apartment not handled as a secure crime scene. So when the police get there on December 2nd, initially they cordon off the trash room, apartment 1201, which is the shared apartment of Phoebe and Ant, not treated with the same rigor. Homicides detectives take a quick look and find no obvious signs of a violent struggle, no overturned furniture, etc. And probably likely influenced by the weird scenario, they are like, it's an accident. So that whole opportunity to collect any forensic evidence is totally missed. So, like we said, the wine glasses never dusted for fingerprints, never collected for analysis. I'm sure that they told a hell of a story if they would have been processed. Blood evidence in the apartment is not analyzed. There's blood on the computer and mouse, computer, mouse, and keyboard, rather, and on the floor amidst that broken glass. And the police make the assumption that this came from Phoebe cutting herself, but nobody did any sort of analysis on this. We didn't determine if it's even her blood. We didn't look at spatter. Nothing. And then the broken glass itself, we don't reconstruct to see what the object is. We're just like, whatever. So the coroner's assistant counsel does state there was no puddle of liquid on the floor corresponding to that broken glass, but some liquid on the wall, suggesting, I think, that the glass probably was thrown. So this is going to hint at some sort of violent outburst, whether an argument or even if she's by herself and throws it in anger. The police don't pursue it, and they just kind of lay back and accept the idea that she kind of threw herself down the trash. There's no collection of CCTV footage or building access data. The police don't secure the building surveillance footage immediately. There were CCTV cameras in the lobby and possibly at multiple entrances and exits. Obviously, it's the lobby CCTV that we know Phoebe left during the fire alarm and came back. But one crucial gap: did any camera cover the 12th floor hallway or elevator? No. And if it did, there was no attempt to obtain it, or it was already overwritten. By the time that the homicide detectives think to check the CCTV beyond the fire alarm footage, days have gone by. And most security systems, as we know from previous episodes, overwrite after 24 to 72 hours, especially in 2010. So, if anyone entered or exited the building around the time of Phoebe's death or in that window, the evidence is gone forever. So, huge oversight. Later inquests would say police were slow to check CCTV, resulting in lost evidence. So, Lorne, her grandfather, he notices something on the carpet outside the apartment. There are large shoe prints with traces of a white substance leading away from Phoebe's door, believed to have been some kind of residue from, he describes it as a fire extinguisher or cleaning agent. So they seem to suggest that someone had walked out of the apartment after the incident. Police don't take castings or photographs of these footprints. So, yeah. This one pisses me off so much. The investigators leave Phoebe's computers and phone in the apartment, which is accessible by Anthony Hampel in the days after her death. They do not immediately seize any electronic devices. And the only reason why is because they just assume it's a suicide or they suspect no foul play whatsoever. So they are thinking the devices are not relevant beyond possibly a suicide note, which they never found. And when they did finally collect them, it appeared that someone had logged into Phoebe's computer in the intervening days between her death and when it was collected. And later evidence would show that every email Phoebe had ever sent was deleted from her computer and email account. Phoebe had 2 mobile phones. One went missing and was never found. One was eventually found, but the other one's gone forever. By the time the other one's found, who knows if the data's gone. There's an article from The Age titled, "Boyfriend Used Computer After Chute Death," strongly suggesting that Anthony had accessed her computer within hours, if not days after the incident. If he or somebody else felt the need to delete her emails, why? My guess is there's something incriminating on it or revealing, or maybe this is some kind of weird panic move. There's no evidence to say who deleted the emails. We only know that forensic IT experts examined the hard drive and they're gone. So something's going on. So Lorne, given these lapses, he becomes like a dog with a bone. He's like done with the police. He is going to just go freaking ham on this. So he methodically documents everything. Inconsistencies, the no fingerprints, the no testing of the glasses, no immediate canvass of the neighborhood. He ends up gathering more evidence privately than the police did initially. Lorne himself was the one who contacted the manufacturer of the trash chute to get the technical specifications, which he did use to do his replica experiment. He was the one who kept pressing the police not to close the case. However, like we said, 5 days later, it's declared an accident, and less new evidence of foul play has emerged. The homicide squad theorizes that Phoebe is drunk, broke a glass, cut herself. She became confused or panicked. In an attempt to dispose of the glass, she takes the trash out. They think that she may have fell in somehow. They also think that she may have climbed into the chute as a bizarre suicide attempt or due to a hallucination of some sort because of the combination of medication and alcohol. One detective floats the idea she thought the chute was a way out or some kind of portal, given her impaired state, which is just an incredible statement, really. I mean, top-notch police work. One early theory by a different detective was that Phoebe had been sleepwalking, cut her hand, got delusional, had this idea to get rid of the mess by going down the chute, and did so without fully understanding what she was doing. So, I'm trying to keep an open mind, but it seems like the investigators are bending over backwards to push away any form of foul play from this case. Oh, maybe it's Anthony Hample and his name, his parents, his social influence. I don't know. But he's never officially treated as a suspect. They interview him the night of the death, and again, sometime later, but they had never seriously considered charging him or even really investigating him. So, but as we move on, some weird details about Ant's behavior that night. Witness accounts and his own statements. After finding the blood in the broken glass, Anthony ordered takeaway dinner for one from a nearby restaurant, which he ate by himself in the apartment while waiting for Phoebe's father to arrive for the planned dinner meeting. So I want everyone to just, maybe close your eyes for a second and think about this. Your significant other, girlfriend, is missing. Totally gone. Not in the apartment. All her stuff is still there. You have no way of finding her. There's blood in the apartment. There's broken glass in the apartment. There's 2 wine glasses in the apartment, which to me, I would scream that she's cheating on me. So what you do is you come in, you find all this stuff, and you sit down and you order takeout and you eat that meal and you have a beer, and all that's happening, you're eating this meal when you know that you have plans to go to dinner later that night. Insanity. Police found the detail odd, but not criminal. Shocking. People react to stress in some strange ways, but holy shit. If you're not calling police if you find blood or family members, by his account, he thought maybe Phoebe cut herself and went out. So he wasn't immediately alarmed. Only when she didn't return by evening did he seek help. So, like I said, 2 wine glasses. Anthony says we hadn't been together that afternoon. Hadn't seen each other. So, who drank out of the second glass? It's possible Phoebe drank out of both of them, but it definitely interjects the possibility for someone being in the apartment. Ant was at work. Was there a visitor, a friend, a foe? No, who was there, or was it just her? The investigation never addresses that. They don't test for DNA or prints. Phone records probably could have helped, but her iPhone broken on Tuesday and her other phone is missing, plus deleted email. A lot of her communication trail is completely gone. So Anthony's powerful family connections are the next kind of big one in this, which this it kind of gets into the conspiracy theory territory, but it is worth mentioning because this does happen. Um, did the Hampel family affect the investigation? The father's a judge. Stepmom's a county court judge. Would the police subconsciously or consciously kind of be less inclined to presume foul play? Maybe. There's no direct evidence of any kind of undue influence. So I just want to say that. But the optics are not great. So there is a family friend of the Handsjuks that approached a senior police officer she knew and implored them to properly investigate. She got permission. I'm sorry. She got the impression that some in the force were a little reluctant to, get tangled in a case that would implicate a judge's son. Once again, this is anecdotal, but it fuels their family's feeling the case is kind of swept under the rug. So, no charges were ever brought against Anthony or anyone else. I would just like to say that. The police did not, if they had concrete evidence of a homicide, they never brought it forward. But you could also argue that they really didn't look. Yeah. Yeah. So, now we're going to go into the coronial inquest and its controversial conclusion. So, family for Phoebe is absolutely relentless. They keep pressure on everybody, especially Lorne and the grandfather. They're dissatisfied with the police findings, so they petition for a coroner's inquest to fully examine the death. So in Victoria, Australia, unusual deaths can be subject to a coroner's investigation and potentially a public inquest, which is like a court hearing that determines the cause of death. Initially, it's not guaranteed that there's going to be an inquest for Phoebe's case. The coroner would have to accept. The coroner could have accepted the police view and closed the case, but Phoebe's family fights hard. They raise $50,000 to pay for legal representation to argue for an inquest. They essentially have to fund their own pursuit here of justice. Despite resistance from Anthony's side, his barrister objected, claiming there was no evidence of any crime and no need for an inquest. The coroner agreed to hold a full inquest in 2013. We're 3 years on from her death. So this is not something that takes place often in America, at least not in any jurisdiction surrounding me. But it used to be more common, but it is a thing. And inquests are basically like a little court trial with some different rules. But there are witnesses, there's a jury that's commissioned, there's statements that are made, evidence that's reviewed, and then the jury decides on the cause and manner. So, not common, but they do happen. And they are called an inquest. So, just a little coroner family fun for you. So, the coroner's court hears from witnesses that include police officers, forensic experts, Phoebe's friends and family, the building staff, and Anthony Hampel himself shows up. They do this incredibly exhaustive review of the evidence, or what little evidence is available. Ant takes the stand. He recounts the events as he remembers them. He maintained that she had been in a bad state from drinking the night before. She's in recovery mode on the morning of the 2nd, the date of her death. Last saw her alive before he went to work. Describes the scene when he gets home, broken glass, blood, thought Phoebe might have stepped out. At some point, he started to become very worried, especially in the evening. He went downstairs and coincidentally learned that there's a body that had been found. The coroner's counsel asks him directly if he had anything to do with her death, and he says, no, of course not. So he's reported as being calm and firm in his denial. He states he loves Phoebe and has been planning a future with her. Even though we know Phoebe at the time was not exactly planning a future with him. She even, in some of her correspondence, fears that he might propose, and says that she's not going to say yes. So the coroner's investigation does help pin down that Phoebe entered the chute sometime between 12:03 and 7 p.m. Yeah, it's really pinning it down. Leaning closer to 7, given the evidence. Anthony said he got home at 6. The apartment's already empty. Bag, keys, wallet, broken glass, blood on the computer, mouse and keyboard. Confirms those observations. He insists Phoebe's not there at 6, implying that she was already in the chute or dead. There's some discrepancy about when exactly the concierge found her. The accepted narrative is just after 7 p.m. So there witnesses at the inquest, they do paint a picture of Phoebe's recent life with the multiple breakups, the calls to the helplines. Her friend Brendan recounts on November 30th that she threw her new phone in frustration because Aunt was calling her incessantly. Pretty clear there's volatility. A neighbor in the Valencia building reports hearing a woman screaming on one occasion prior. It doesn't pin down what exactly it was, but it was either the first or the second. IT forensics experts testified the activity on the Apple iMac computer in the apartment. Anthony's personal account on the computer was used in the evening hours after Phoebe's death. Specifically, the interface, the inference was that he logged in and possibly accessed Phoebe's accounts or files, and that's how the deletion of her emails came to light. Ant claimed he might have used the computer to search for clues or contact people after she died, but it's unclear. The inquest definitely highlights the deleted emails and the missing phone. Ant denies deleting anything, suggesting that Phoebe did it herself sometime earlier. The the counsel assisting stance is okay, hold on. I wrote this weird in my notes. Counsel assisting the coroner, Deborah Semensumna, whose job it was to impartially help the coroner, does not agree with the straightforward accidental death. In her submission, she argues that given the bruises, the blood in the apartment, the lack of fingerprints, and the inadequate investigation, there's no way anyone could confidently conclude exactly what happened. She wrote that these factors, quote, do not enable a positive finding to be made on the balance of probabilities as to the involvement of Mr. Hampel or another third party, end quote. In plain English, she's saying we can't prove someone else was involved. We can't prove that someone else wasn't involved. She specifically noted an inability to exculpate Ant on the balance of probabilities and pointed out that aspects of Mr. Hampel's evidence were unsatisfactory, which is a polite way of saying that some of his story is full of shit. So, despite his own assisting counsel's reservations, coroner Peter White ultimately ruled in line with the accidental theory December 10th, 2014, 4 years after Phoebe's death. He delivered his findings, which were Phoebe Handsjuk's death was a result of her entering the garbage chute by herself while in a sleepwalking or disoriented state caused by alcohol and drugs, and she fell feet first down the chute without intending self-harm. He specifically ruled out suicide, concluding she probably did not mean to kill herself, which is, I guess, a point in her favor. But he also ruled out any involvement of a third party, but said there was no sufficient evidence. So this would typically go down. Sorry, I had some microphone issues there. In our county, this would go down as possibly the exsanguination, but it would depend. But this would read something like, let's just say she had a bunch of blunt force injuries. This would read something like multiple blunt force injuries, due to fall, from 30 meters or whatever it was. And this would be undetermined. The autopsy report would say something like, you know, that this is the evidence that we collected, these are the injuries that were noted, and if more evidence is presented, then the cause of death or manner can be amended. But it would absolutely not say accident. So it's pretty shitty. So the coroner, he also complies with a request from Ant's lawyers to formally state that Ant is exonerated of involvement. So this finding absolves Anthony Hampel of any wrongdoing, and also notes that police never considered him a suspect, and that nothing in the evidence ever directly implicated him. So, all right, sorry about that. I had to sit up for a second. My arm was going numb. Um, the coroner does go so far as to cite Phoebe's hobbies and personalities as potential factors. He mentioned that Phoebe has a penchant for climbing. She was known to enjoy rock climbing and adventurous activities, suggesting this trait might have made her more likely to do something stupid like climbing a chute. That's bullshit. That's not the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but it's, I don't know, top 10, top 5. It's up there. Um, So, the inquest is a less than satisfactory outcome, I will admit. Um, the family sits through weeks of evidence that all point to foul play, and the coroner pretty much says no one else is involved, case closed. It's insane. The dude ignores the advice of his own counsel, uh, who had urged for an open finding, meaning undetermined, or at least not fully exonerating dipshit. I don't understand. Why would you go through the trouble of a inquest just to rubber stamp it, you know, accidental? So after the inquest, the Handsjuk family, they weigh their options. They initially hope to appeal the findings to the Supreme Court, which technically is possible in Victoria, but it's super narrow grounds. So essentially, what this comes down to is you have to prove that the coroner made an error of law, not just that they interpreted facts differently. So their lawyers advise them is the appeal's not going to succeed. Given the constraints of Victorian law at that time, appeals could not be on factual grounds, only legal process issues. They've already spent $50K, they've exhausted their savings, and they can't afford any more legal battles. So, Natalie, which is her mother, quote, says, quote, the legal system has failed those who need it most, end quote. And she's correct. That's horseshit. I don't know who this coroner is. I didn't do any extra research on him, but he's a moron. He's up for re-election or something. I don't know. Lorne, the grandfather, he's like, yeah, nah. He doesn't give up. His conviction that it was murder, but after 2014, there's no other legal recourse. This is it. So that is the final legal recourse. However, The public interest in Phoebe's case explodes after the inquest. Two investigative journalists from The Age, which is one of Melbourne's leading newspapers, decided to dig deeper. In 2016, they launched a podcast series called Phoebe's Fall, which revisited all the evidence, re-interviewed people, and put the coroner's findings under the microscope. So it's a 6-part podcast. Drew a lot of attention in Australia and internationally. It casts large doubts on the official narrative and highlighting how it's just rife with unanswered questions. And it kind of galvanized public opinion. So one trigger for the journalists was a dramatic statement made by Anthony's sister in 2016, who was arrested in 2014 for trafficking cocaine. But anyway, she posted something on Facebook. She put up a photo with herself with Phoebe, and the caption was, "You were a fragile little flower that no one watered. You and your family were let down by the justice system and those who represent it. I only hope that one day the truth will come out so that they may have some peace." This is coming from the sister of Phoebe's boyfriend. It's pretty provocative. It shows that Chrissy, which is his sister's name, also doubts the official story. And I'm assuming suspects her own brother, if not the situation. She suspects the situation. The post is gone in 12 hours. But it's scooped up and shared to Reddit before it's deleted. The Age journalists catch wind of it, and they launch the investigation under the banner, "One day the truth will come out," quoting Chrissy. So the Phoebe's Fall podcast, they did a lot. It exposed the general public to kind of the troubling aspects of this case. And in 2017-2018, Phoebe's case becomes a catalyst for legal reform. So one significant positive outcome is that there is a change in Victorian law regarding the coroner inquests and how families can pursue justice. So the government acknowledges there's a systemic problem. Families are stuck if they disagree with the coroner's decision unless they have evidence of a legal error. Her family had to accept what happened against the weight of the evidence, basically. And they had no realistic avenue to appeal it. So in 2018, the Victorian government introduced and passed amendments to the Coroners Act of 2008, which these changes are directly influenced by Phoebe's case. The new laws make it easier for coroner findings to be set aside and inquests reopen in certain circumstances. So if new facts and circumstances come to light, or if a finding seems against the weight of the evidence, families can now apply to have the case reinvestigated or have a fresh inquest held. So it definitely makes the system more flexible and responsive to these kinds of cases. The coroner's court was given the power to quash the previous findings, even the ones that were made under the old laws, and reopen the investigation. So the window to appeal was expanded from 28 days to 3 months. And these changes were described as the most crucial development for families stuck in limbo awaiting justice. Uh-oh. They duplicated the call on CAD, which means that I'm dispatched. Okay. And we're going to wait for the phone to ring. There it is. Excuse me a moment. All right. No rest for the wicked. I have indeed been dispatched out to a scene. So uh, I have to go, but I am going to bookmark where I'm at right here. And then I'm going to come back. So for you, it will be like a couple of seconds, and I'll be back talking about Anthony Hample. But for me, it's going to be like 3.5 hours. So I shall return. All right. So for those of you listening at home, it's probably only been about 5 or 10 seconds. For me, I'm returning about 3.5 hours later from that call that I just came from. So we are picking back up. We were talking about legislation that had come from Phoebe's case, now with more options for family members to dispute things as far as coroner findings and stuff, rather than just going strictly the legal route of errors in law and stuff like that. So there's that. Police procedures. This case did prove to be kind of a learning moment for Australian Melbourne police. There was no formal legislation that was introduced, but the Melbourne police did say going forward they would be more careful to treat unusual deaths with greater scrutiny and not jump to conclusions like they did. So there was some internal training that was adjusted to reinforce evidence preservation and thoroughness in more ambiguous cases. So other kind of crazy developments. As the years passed, Phoebe's family and really worldwide supporters are looking for answers. And then in 2018, the same year the legislation is passed, Anthony Hample is back in headlines. And what is he in headlines for? Well, he's linked to the sudden death of yet another woman he's romantically involved with. So this creep starts dating a 25-year-old model named Bailey Schneider in 2017. In June of 2018, Bailey is found dead in her parents' home, hours after she apparently had broken up with Anthony Hample. She was discovered with a golden cord wrapped around her neck. Her death was ruled suicide by asphyxiation or hanging. So essentially, authorities are going to say she hung herself. Bailey's family, stop me if this sounds familiar, is adamant that this is not possible. She's happy, bubbly, has no reason to do such a thing, and this scenario just does not make sense. Anthony is likely the last person to see her alive, and suspicion starts swirling again. The media picks up on Anthony being linked to 2 women now that have died under disputed circumstances, and this is going to trigger a fresh look at, or a fresh call to scrutinize Phoebe's case. People are starting to wonder, is this a coincidence or is there actually a pattern? Which, boy, it looks like there's a pattern. So in 2018, the Homicide Squad does investigate Bailey's death. In 2020, the coroner for Bailey's case rules there's no evidence of foul play. Deems her death self-inflicted. Anthony Hample cooperated with that investigation fully. He's never charged. Once again, the official conclusion absolutely clears him. 2 women, 8 years apart, both dating the same guy, both die in ways their families refuse to accept as suicide. It's insane. I mean, this guy, it's like, he's never been charged with any crime related to death or otherwise, and he 100% maintains his innocence. After Bailey's death, he moves out of Valencia and he eventually gets married. Um, he seems to have moved on with life, while two families are stuck with lingering unanswered questions, like who wiped the fingerprints off the chute door. It's pretty much a certainty that somebody did, whether it was a Valencia hotel employee or apartment employee who just cleaned it, because it was like a high class place. I find that to be pretty unlikely given the relatively short window. I think if Phoebe went in herself, we'd expect to see her fingerprints. That 100% to me screams that this is staged. The most glaring one: who or what caused the broken glass and the blood in the apartment? Nobody's findings satisfactorily explain that. The police ignore it. The coroner glosses over it, and it's if they're gonna stick with the sleepwalking haze theory, did she accidentally shatter the glass, cut herself, bleed on the keyboard, uh, then decide to go trash the room or go to the trash room? It's kind of a dumb sequence. Um, if I was developing a theory of this crime, I would say that there was an argument, you know, verbal, and then escalates to physical. A glass is thrown. There's liquid on the wall, glass shards on the floor. Phoebe somehow gets cut in the process. And then I don't know if Anthony panics because she was hurt, or what, or if he just had enough. But I think that she goes down the chute not of her own free will. But if it's not Anthony, then who's the other person in the apartment? I think it's pretty safe to say that there was somebody else there. Typically, people don't drink out of two separate wine glasses. Even if it was just a friend of hers, male or female, it still would clear a lot of things up if they came forward and said, "Yeah, I was there." Uh, His timeline doesn't make a lot of sense. Everything up until noon seems to track. She was obviously caught during that fire drill. It it just doesn't make any sense. There's been rumors of like a mystery man that Phoebe met up with, like could have been a friend or a drug dealer. That was hinted at in some of the statements. The family has also hinted, um, or put forth the theory that maybe she stumbled onto something or someone that like posed a danger. Um, One of the most outlandish theories comes from actually her grandfather, which up until this point has been a rock star. He speculates her death has something to do with the Melbourne drug scene. So Phoebe had dabbled in recreational drugs, and Anthony's sister was involved in dealing cocaine. Lorne kind of muses if maybe a debt or some criminal element was involved, but there's literally no evidence to support that. I don't know where that comes from. Um, why was her second phone never found? If someone removed it, then that would suggest that they didn't want whatever was on it to be seen. Same with the deleted emails. Um, it really, to me, paints a clear picture of a premeditated attempt to like obscure those communications. What was in them? You can only imagine that Phoebe had shot a text to somebody that said, Aunt is coming home early, we're fighting, or I've even had seen cases where people are like text their friends and they're like, hey, like so and so's coming home. If you don't hear from me, like call the police because they just know it's going to be bad. So, but since we didn't seize those electronic devices and we let them go, um, this is what we're stuck with, and this is why I push so hard on other episodes like exigent circumstances. And I don't know in Australia if it's the same, but here in America, Seize the electronics under exigent circumstances. This is why electronics and stuff are seized, because they are easily manipulated, destroyed, what have you. And then, another big one in this one is the 2 a.m. group text that Phoebe sent on December 1st. She sends it to her family. It goes to Anthony. It goes to her boss. Some people say it was like a cry for help, a sarcastic thing, like kind of saying she's not okay. It does mention going to the hospital, life being a dream. If she was hinting at harming herself, I guess that would probably support the suicide angle from the coroner, but her family deduces it was more of a drug-induced nonsensical message than an actual suicide note. It's really a very ambiguous part of this. I don't really know if I would consider it a a suicide note. So it's let me pull it up here because I have it. I put it in the notes here. So the text is, and I'll quote it. It starts with, "Hi, family. I'm in bed, about to sleep. And when I wake, I will transform into the most incredible human being you've ever seen. Not. I will go to hospital. It is much safer there, and I hear the special tonight is tomato soup. Delicious, nutritious. I love you all very much, but not enough to send an individual text. Sorry about that. Time is sleep, and I must be on my way. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. XO." So, it definitely does not make any sense. I don't know if she wrote this uh there's a lot of reasons someone will go to the hospital, especially if there's shattered glass and blood and stuff on the scene. Then maybe this was written at the time that the shattered glass and the blood and everything happened. I'm not sure, but this to me does not read as a self-harm statement or note. Um, it just doesn't. I mean, like I said, most suicide, all the ones that I've ever read have been very straightforward, very to the point. They are either just outright lies of I didn't do what I was accused of. Those things never happen, or they're straight out like the absolute truth. Like, yes, I did these crimes, I did these things, I'm worthless. Goodbye. Like they are not kind of this ambiguous, weird, like, oh, going to the hospital for some tomato soup. Like, it's very strange. So both sides use the text message to spin their narrative. Um, it's very hard to make heads or tails of. I would say, in my experiences, it's not a typical suicide note. I would not take it as a suicidal ideation. So, and then of course, there's the burning question that neither side is right. This isn't a suicide. This isn't an or this isn't a homicide. This is just an accident. Some freak, weird accident where Phoebe is incredibly drunk. She's medicated, and she, for some reason, is enacting a strange dream or hallucination or looking for some kind of escape, and she crawls into the chute for reasons unknown. Along the way, she breaks the glass, hurts herself, just contributes to her confusion. She somehow manages to get in the chute. Maybe she's got like an adrenaline fueled moment, or an unlikely, like kind of lucky move that gets her in there. And she just falls to her death. It's a tragedy. It's not impossible, but it's highly improbable. Weird things do happen when people are intoxicated, especially if they're mixing drugs with alcohol and drugs with other drugs. So, however, even if it is a freak crazy accident. It does not explain why the prints were wiped, the emails were deleted afterwards. I would say that those two things, the missing phone, or I guess the three things, the missing phone, the deleted emails, and the wiped down chute, like surround and door, strongly would suggest human intervention after the fact, at a minimum. So whether Anthony decided, okay, there's some incriminating stuff on this phone, like incriminating as in will make me look bad, uh, so I have to get rid of it. Uh, Somebody interfered after the fact. Um, there's a ton of people out there in 2020. Robin Bowles, she's an author, published Into the Darkness. It's a book specifically on Phoebe's story. It basically comes to the same conclusion. I don't think Phoebe put herself down that chute. I think someone else was involved, but that someone is unidentified and uncharged as of this day. So her death is one of those that kind of burrows into your mind and just doesn't let go, at least for me. It feels like there's enough information that we're right on the cusp of some sort of resolution, but it's all circumstantial. And it's so disheartening to know that the evidence was there and it just wasn't collected. I don't know if it was laziness or negligence or what, but it's just like so viscerally upsetting that I mean, she was treated basically like trash. I mean, it's insane. It's as an investigator, kind of at heart, I when I was doing the research for this case and I was compiling the notes, I kind of kept the question in the back of my mind: what is the truth here? So if we strip away all the bullshit and the noise, the things that are concrete, Phoebe died a violent, awful death. That happened. There were signs of a struggle, telltale signs of a struggle, I will say. Bruises, broken glass, blood in the apartment. The official explanation requires not one, but a chain of super unlikely events. Now, anything's possible. Truth is stranger than fiction, but that so many unlikely things have to happen in such a perfect order. And then not only that, you have to ignore all the other stuff. So you have to ignore Anthony's timeline. You have to ignore the fact that he came home and ordered himself food and proceeded to eat that food while he knew she was missing or knew she wasn't there, had no idea where she was, and was also planning on going to dinner with her father that night. That's just not, that's so beyond the realm of normal human behavior. Her family vehemently rejects the idea that she went voluntarily into the chute, which doesn't really mean much as far as being like a hard and fast fact, but it counts for a little bit. The problem is the evidence that would definitively prove this as a homicide is lacking, and that's due to investigative failures. It's speculative, but had Anthony come from a less connected family, maybe the police would have been more suspicious. It's really, it's very strange is how I would classify this case. And I know it's a really cliche word to use, but it's just a very odd set of circumstances. And this case It also kind of points out the fragility of the truth in forensic cases, like a literal single moment of bad judgment, like one singular instance of bad judgment, like not getting the CCTV footage, can mean the difference between solving a case and 15 years later, people are still making podcasts about it because you fucked up so bad. So, I mean, in her case, have there been CCTV footage showing her alone or someone carrying her or someone forcing her? I mean, this isn't like an entirely different story. Like the whole outcome hinged on like this tiny thing that slipped through the cracks. Cracks. So it's just really the fragility of the truth is just it's when you live in that world and you work in that world, it's insane to think about. Everyone can sit and pick these cases apart years later, but really, I mean, it comes down to like singular moments of bad judgment or negligence. uh, Forensic science did give us some answers. um we know how she died physically in this case. It, unfortunately, the intent is going to remain unknown. It just justice feels a little elusive in this case. There's no conviction. There's no clear resolution. We have a coroner's report that some find convincing, some don't. It's just it's a very frustrating case, and I think her mom, Natalie, she said, this is she's okay, here's her quote. She said, quote, "I don't think I have properly accepted that she's not here. Every now and then I will see a lovely exchange between a mother and daughter or get news of Phoebe's friends is pregnant, and it makes it all fresh again. Perhaps Phoebe got in a fight with a visitor to the apartment. I think she may have said something to upset someone. I don't know who, but I think she's been injured, and whoever was involved was panicked and tried to get rid of her." I think mom, Natalie, is I think she's right, just dead nuts. She's got it. I think that's exactly what happened. For me, this scenario resonates as a accident or assault that was not a premeditated murder, but like a super panicked cover up. It The shoot is horrible. I mean, the shoot's a terrible idea. You know she's going to be found. The wiping the prints, the not being able to conceal the broken glass and the blood in the apartment. I mean, this is like a hasty, not well thought out cover up. So this screams as a crime of opportunity. I mean, she didn't die in vain in terms of legal reforms. And I guess that's something to take away, but morally the case it just feels unresolved. The coroner in this case actually noted the inadequacies of the initial investigation made it impossible to fully rule out or in third party involvement. So in the first 48 hours, the truth is gone. One day the truth will come out, I hope. um his sister, Anthony's sister, put it out there that she hopes that you know somebody will come forward and say what happened. And my guess would be that she is talking about her brother. It's I think she knows that he was either involved some way or in the cover up or directly was involved in her murder. And I'll call it a murder because that's what it was. So it's I kind of strive in these to say like factual and fair, but it's it's hard when you work in this field. It's like I empathize with her family. Um, And I even empathize with some of the investigators because they probably genuinely thought they were dealing with like a weird, bizarre accident. And I've been there. I've been too close to a case, and I've made the mistake of like, okay, this is this type of case, and I'm just too close to it. And then I step back, and days go by, or weeks go by, and then I look back, and I'm like, oh my god, like, whoa, I was dumb. Like, how did I not see this glaring thing right in front of me? So I get it, and I empathize with them. I really do. So, I mean, it's at the end of the day, Phoebe Handsjuk fell 30 meters to her death. This case is a cascade of assumptions, procedures not followed, evidence not collected. It's a system that decided what was likely and then stopped asking what was true. The bruises were real, the chute was real, and so was all the silence that followed. If you know something about this case, or any case like it, don't be the one who waits too long to speak. It's I cannot implore you enough. If you see something or you know something, just come forward. Don't be the person who reveals it on their deathbed, or their family finds some long lost note, uh, about like, hey, I was there that day. Time buries everything, but the truth does not decompose. So it doesn't matter how much time has gone by. The truth is the truth, and it's out there, and somebody knows it, and I believe that somebody's probably Anthony. Um, but it's a pretty disheartening case because it's not like that we have a lot of conspiracy theories that are rooted in some alternate form of reality, like a lot of these cases. I mean, these are like, we have legitimate evidence that was noted, not collected, and not tested. And it all points to someone else being involved. So, it's been a wild night. I am on call for a couple more hours here, so I'm going to try to get some sleep. You have been listening to Buried. I am Silas Knight. Don't forget to check out the Decomp Crew merch on Teespring. Subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. If you feel so inclined, grab my debut novel, We Are Buried Here Too, on Amazon. Hardcover, paperback, and digital. I appreciate any support you can give me, and keep any case suggestions. And they don't have to be like big national or international news. Even if you have a case that you are personally working on, or it's for a friend or a family member that has passed or something, and you want just like a unbiased third party analysis, submit it. Send me a message. You can go over to Facebook, Silas Knight, Night. Send me a message. Leave a comment on YouTube, and I'll reach out to you, or on Spotify. I'll take a look at anything, and whether you want it as an episode or you just want my input on it privately, let me know. And if you have a case that you want to see an episode on, by all means, drop a comment with that suggestion. Anything you want to hear about a specific case, maybe you've heard some of results or some procedure or something, and it doesn't make sense to you, or you don't understand it, and I can try to explain maybe the results or why things were done the way that they were done. So yeah, just keep the comments and keep all the suggestions flowing. So until next time, Decomp Crew, stay sharp, stay kind, and never stop digging.